Hello, hello. Welcome to our webinar with Subsplash and Carey Nieuwhof, 3 innovative ways thriving churches deepen engagement. We are so happy to be here. My name is Anna McEldoon. I am a senior project manager here at Subsplash, joined by our Chief Revenue Officer, Chris Sharp, and our special guest today, Carey Nieuwhof. If you're not familiar with Carey, he is a best-selling author and well-known speaker, but also a leading voice and thought leader around church growth and leadership. Carey produces invaluable content and community for pastors and leaders, and he is a dear friend of Subsplash. We are so honored to host you today, Carey.
Really thrilled to be with you. Thanks so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Got people from all over the world here. That's awesome.
People from all over the world. It is such a gift to have technology that allows us to do this and bring people from everywhere. So we would love for you to drop a comment where you're located. It's so fun to see just how far the reach can be through a platform like this. And we are also excited to announce that throughout this webinar, in fact, in just a minute, we're going to select 2 random winners for a $100 Amazon gift card, which, if you didn't know, it is Amazon Prime Day and you can find some really good deals. So we are really excited again to have you all today. And a quick run through of our agenda. We have 3 main points that we're going to touch on. First is going to be engagement versus attendance. Second is going to be tech-savvy ways to deepen connections. And we're going to round it out with reimagining serving. So a quick little giveaway. Drum roll, please. Forrest Lester from City Church is our first winner, and Molly Cunningham from Crossroads Church. So you two, congratulations. Check your email. Enjoy a fun purchase on us.
Excellent. Congratulations. And Prime Day. Hopefully you had something on the list that
I've already purchased. I don't know about you. Small things.
Already slow. Yeah. Clicked by. Okay. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to talk with Carey and have a conversation. Thankful for Carey and his partnership. And we're going to be talking about what will it take to be a thriving church in 2025 and beyond. The reality is the world has changed, right? It's not the world that we grew up in. It's not the world that many of us were trained in ministry in. Today, there's been a major digital transformation within a church or within a culture that isn't as aware of the church. So, Carey, you've done a lot of research. You've had a lot of conversations. And what are you seeing in this area for what it takes for a church to thrive going forward as we think about mission and methods?
You know, I think in a nutshell, the mission really hasn't changed in a couple thousand years. The methods have turned upside down, and even more upside down in the last 5 years. I was thinking about, I'm sure we have some church planters here, but there used to be a pretty predictable formula. You just copy it and it works, and it doesn't work anymore the same way. It's a very different world. And, as we're going to talk about today, the digital world has really made it more complicated than ever. And, you said it well. Even if you graduated from seminary last year, I'm not sure they had a class in coding. I'm pretty sure they didn't. Greek, I know how to parse a Greek verb, but I don't know how to write HTML. I don't know how to develop software. I don't know any of that stuff. And of course, as I've talked about a lot, everybody you want to reach is online. So that's the good news. The good news is everybody you want to reach in your community, and even for average sized churches, 150, 200 people, the good news is you can make a significant digital footprint and connection in your community. The hard news is it's complicated. There's not one social media network. There's multiple social media networks. There's not, and even if you perfect a strategy, like I've been doing digital content for over a decade, and literally the conversation my team and I are having all the time is what worked 5 years ago doesn't work anymore. Mm-hmm. You could just take the formula from 2019, plug it into today, and you get a fraction of the results you had in 2019. So how do you solve that? And obviously, good preaching is a real help. Connecting people is a real help. But I look at it this way. Good preaching is a decent way to grow a church, but it's no guarantee you're going to grow a church anymore. Because as you mentioned, the culture's kind of tuned out. They're kind of like, nobody, and Christians, particularly if you live in the Bible Belt, you think people wake up every Sunday morning and they're like, where are we going to go to church? That's actually not what the church people are thinking about. They're thinking about, are we going to sleep in? Are we going to go to the beach? Are we going to go to the ski hill? Are we going to go to the mall? Where are we going to grab brunch? And the way I think about it is on Saturday morning, for those of us who are Christians on this call, what do you wake up thinking about? You think about recreation, a day off, what you're going to do with the kids. Maybe you're going to see some family or have a cookout at your house or something like that. You don't think, am I going to go to synagogue? You're just not, you don't wake up on Friday going, I wonder if we should go to mosque today. Well, what you think on Friday and Saturday are what unchurched people now think like on Sunday, and formerly churched and deconverted people. They're like, no, I remember talking to one guy a few years ago at our church who showed up, and he had grown up in church, and he started attending us when we were a portable church. And I asked him, so what happened? He goes, I haven't been to church in 25 years. I said, was that hard given your background? And he said this, I'll never forget it. He said, the first Sunday was the hardest. And he said, then it was easy. I just stopped going. And we have like hundreds of millions of Americans that have just stopped going, and Canadians, and around the world. So I think that's the reality. So it's going to take a lot more than it took, or different things.
Right.
And trying harder is no guarantee either. I'll just try harder, right? Well, trying harder with the wrong strategy isn't going to get you very far.
That's right. Yeah. So looking at the state of the church today, here is maybe a sobering stat, but also an amazing opportunity. So according to Hartford, 33% of churches in the U.S. are considered growing, which means either with Hartford or Barna, over half are not. They're stagnant or they're not increasing in growth.
So you want to hear the cynical take on that stat?
Let's hear it.
Because, we were working on research for this webinar. I believe I'm right in this. That is self-reported data. So, pastors are optimists. It's like, is your church growing? Pretty sure I saw one extra person in there last Sunday over this Sunday, so I'm going to check the box. That is the most optimistic church growth stat I've seen for our era. Many of the others come in at somewhere between 5% and 15% of churches are growing. So, hey, I'm an optimist. I hope that's accurate. I'm not sure it's accurate because it's self-reported. But yeah, it still means in the most optimistic scenario, 67% of churches are plateaued or declining.
Right. So as you on this call, for those of you at a church, whether a church plant or an established church, think about where you are today. Maybe we'll be honest about it, Carey, and think about where we really are today in growth. But also there's opportunities. What an opportunity in front of us to reach your city.
Yeah.
I think that more than anything, you both have really just emphasized the need for a conversation like this and an ongoing emphasis on how we can focus on engagement versus attendance. We're going to really dive in here now. I appreciate just starting with those stark realities and moving into what that really means. But we are, again, looking at 3 innovative ways thriving churches deepen engagement. And we're going to start with the first point. And Carey, we have this quote here from you. If you want your church to grow, stop trying to attract people, start trying to engage people. We'd love to hear kind of where this came from, what your thought was when you said this. And it just fits perfectly in with this conversation today.
Yeah. So like many pastors, I love growth. I love it when there were more people this month than there were last month. I love that. That's the way I'm wired. And I found myself when I led our church for over 20 years, finding that kind of what we talked about at the beginning, the things that attracted growth in the 90s and the 2000s weren't doing it in the 2010s to the same extent, and definitely are not doing it in the 2020s. Here we are almost halfway through the 2020s. And what I realized is, we live in the attention economy. People have a wide variety of options available to them on a Sunday morning. And I almost felt like it was a bit of a dancing circus, not in an unfaithful way, but it's like, what do I have to do? How good do these series need to be to get a full room? And we had relatively full rooms, but it just felt like 10x the effort for 1x the result. So a number of years ago, I started to rethink the whole thing. And I thought, well, who actually shows up no matter what? And of course, you have faithful people and wonderful people, and they've been to church their whole life. But even when you look at the people you've reached in the last 3 years or 5 years, who shows up regularly? the engaged people, the people who are in a group, the people who are serving, the people who are giving, the people who said, hey, that's not your mission. This is our mission. We're doing this. We're in. And the phrase for that for me was, those are people who are engaged in the mission. And you can do more with 300 engaged people in the mission than you can with 3,000 disengaged people. Mm-hmm. So I started to shift our church to focus more on engagement and less on attendance. And listen, I still want attendance. All right, I want people in the room, because if you lose people, if they never show up, even if they never show up online, you kind of lost them. They just become some of the deconverted, the de-attended. They become part of that crowd, and that's not anybody's mission. So what I really started to double down on was, how do we engage them? How do we move them from the back row to taking a step? What do we need to do? And we did so many things to reposition our church so that we started engaging people earlier, because this is a reality too. If you think about it, right? Church attendance in a Christian era was, oh, I'm sitting in the back row, but I'm really dialed in. And now in a post-Christian era, it takes more for somebody to go from sitting in their living room on a Sunday morning to sitting in your auditorium on a Sunday morning. So they're already more spiritually curious. They've already made a decision, because cultural Christianity is all but dead. So yeah, engagement, I think, is the way to the future.
Yeah. And tell us about these. You've got 5 kind of simple steps here that might be helpful in thinking about engagement as the new attendance.
Yeah, so attendance was never the goal. Like, if you think about Jesus' ministry, and he had huge crowds. I mean, small crowds became huge crowds, became throngs, became a few people who hung around at the cross. Okay, so we know the trajectory of his ministry. But even at his peak, Jesus, when he was teaching his disciples, never said, attend me. He said, follow me, right? He didn't say, hey, we want more people at the next healing than we had at the last healing. It was like, follow me. Just, this is a different way of life. So attendance was never the goal, but a lot of us, we just like attendance. And if we have a full room, we think we have a fulfilled mission. Well, that a full room is not a fulfilled mission. People following Jesus, and God is gracious and he's merciful, and we don't always get it right. And sometimes I skim my Bible when I'm supposed to be reading my Bible. Sometimes my prayer life is distracted, but it's a long obedience in the same direction. So attendance is not the goal, it's a byproduct. And I believe attendance, as we talked about already, grows out of engagement, right? Who attends? The people who don't want to miss are the most engaged people. When they're out of town, they're like, oh, I'm so sad I'm out of town this weekend. The kids have got a game in another city, but I want to be back, or I want to dial in online, or I want to catch the message, or I want to see the live stream, or at least want to follow along on social, or I'll listen to it when I'm at the gym next Tuesday. And then engagement creates passionate people, right? What are we, if you get a gym membership and you join in January and you go twice and you pay your fee every month, but you never go again, what benefit are you getting out of the gym? Answer, 0. The gym is getting a lot of benefit out of you because you're paying the membership fee. There's actually business models built on this. Planet Fitness is built on that. We don't have enough machines for all of our members. We just count on the fact that only 5% of our members are going to dial in and actually do this. So what you really want is, you want people going to the gym because they want to get better. And you want people going to church because they want to grow closer to God. So it's the engagement. It's taking a step out of that back row, taking a step out of the scroll, taking a step out of being a passive consumer to an active contributor that really creates passionate people. And then, a couple more thoughts. Culture is ripe for an alternative to consuming. If you think about it, we now, and I think America is officially in the post-Christian age. If you're 24, why would you go to church? The social benefit is gone from going to church. So you're going to go because you're actually curious about Jesus. And this is the most marketed to generation in history. Not that you can't do marketing. I get it. But marketing in a great series title alone isn't going to do it. This is like, listen, if I'm coming to church, I want to dig in. And that's why I think we've heard so much about discipleship. We realized we had a discipleship crisis in 2020 when the world went crazy and our churches went crazy. It's like, okay, we clearly have not discipled people well. But if you're younger, like if I was to go to a mosque, I don't want Islam light. I don't want Judaism light. I don't want Baha'i light. If I really am thinking of converting, I want to know the real thing. Now, I believe Jesus is the way. And so when people show up at our church, they don't want Jesus light. They want the real thing. And so our culture is so, it's a consumer culture ad nauseum. And I think people are ready for contributing. And then finally, trying to attract people can actually work against the mission, because what you do is you end up creating a bunch of spectators, a bunch of consumers. Consumers are fickle. I used to buy this brand of socks. Now I don't anymore. I don't know that people care that much about socks. Or I used to be a Chevy guy, and now I'm Honda or whatever. People switch their brands all the time. You switch supermarkets, you switch online providers, you just switch your cell phone companies, right? You do that. And then all of a sudden you have this consumer culture. Whereas I think if you really focus on engagement, you've got people who are working together with the mission, not against the mission. And if you think about it, when you have everybody's gifts running in the same direction, you have maximum impact. Because if you have 100 Christians, you might be doing one thing, Chris, Anna, you're doing something else entirely different. But if the three of us get around a common mission and a common vision, we can accomplish more together than we can independently. Well, get 100 people running on mission or 1,000 people running on mission, and poof, you can have a big impact.
Yeah, it's way more exciting to be a part of something that has impact. It has purpose. You're on mission than just what might feel good if I just come and I attend and it feels nice, but there's no real purpose. There's nothing driving me to stay engaged.
Totally.
Absolutely. I think you're just striking the balance so well there, because attendance is so important, but really we are just pushing towards engagement to deepen that connection and relationship. Thank you so much for sharing those 5 points. That was just, like I said, hitting the nail on the head. And we're going to move into point number 2, which is tech savvy ways to deepen connection. I think in 2024 and beyond, we're seeing technology being kind of the next best thing to really engage with our people when they leave the building on Sunday. And Chris, we're really hoping that you can just share a little bit about how Subsplash approaches this topic, what it looks like for us, and really our heartbeat behind how technology is just another tool in the toolbox for the local church.
Yeah, at Subsplash, we're focused on how do we build world-class technology that's helping churches engage people on the discipleship journey. That's the key theme. And so we look at it through this lens. All the technology we build, the technology that we provide, you have people at multiple touch points, and they're going to engage you at some level in this journey, right? How do we think about holistic engagement? And we need to be thoughtful that we're not just engaging our already core committed people. Carey, I think you're alluding to those people. There's people that are already engaged. There's also people that are attending, and then we haven't yet talked about them too much, but there's people that have yet to discover your church or community that may be seeking, they may want to know Jesus. So as we think about this, we want to approach the areas of discovery. Where are you going to be discovered today? How do you move people from attendance into belonging, abiding, and then they're your core people that are excited, they're on mission with you, so they're serving, they're giving. Those are not the outcome of what we're starting with. You attend to right to serve and give. You want to include them in the entire journey, and then from there, they are also willing to go out and share the gospel and make disciples. So one important critical theme as a part of this, and something, Carey, you've talked a lot about, is how do we have our own owned digital spaces versus the alternative, which is rented spaces? Or how do those two work together?
Yeah, it's an interesting concept, right? So I got introduced to this a number of years ago as I started thinking about my podcast and building an email list and also serving in my local church. Everybody's anxious, especially post-COVID. I got to have a social media presence, right, for your church, which is great. But anybody who spent more than 10 minutes trying to figure out a social media strategy realizes that if you're a local church, even frankly, if you're a mega church, let's say, let's wave a magic wand here and pretend you have a church of 10,000 people and a staff of 300. And you have 5 social media specialists. Guess what? You're not going to out Google. You're not going to out Instagram. You're not going to out Facebook. They have literally thousands of employees figuring out how to optimize user engagement every single day. And what that means, especially in the 2020s, more than even a decade ago, is the algorithm is always changing. So with your crack code of 5 people and a budget of $2 million, again, we're playing like, just imagine, okay? You've got, hey, we cracked the algorithm. We know exactly what to do to get attention. And here's the truth. It lasts for 10 minutes. It lasts for a month. And suddenly the algorithm changes again, and we're not profiling carousels anymore. We're profiling something else. Or we're not doing stitches, or we're not doing reels as much, or we're doing reels differently, or now your reel has to be 8 seconds. It can't be 30 seconds. But wait, we just added 3 minutes of content to, it's like, what? Like, you need a full-time team to keep up with what's happening in social media. And then there's these things called insights and analytics. And if you go into your insights and analytics, let's say you have 1,000 followers on Instagram, but you go into your insights and analytics, you realize quickly you have 1,000 followers, but only 10% of them actually saw your posts over the last week. And then you had a whole bunch of people who don't go to your church and live out of state, and you're not a multi-site church, and they found your, content, and you're like, well, I thought I was communicating with my people through Instagram, but the reality is I'm getting a fraction of my audience through Instagram on a regular basis. Now, if that's your frustration, welcome to the digital world. You can have 1,000 employees and still have that problem. Because again, you can't out Google, you can't out Instagram, you can't out TikTok. They're always changing the algorithm, and you're almost betting on winning the lottery. You're not, you're like, well, maybe I'll get 1 million views on this. You probably won't. So that's a rented space. And the problem with that is the landlord can change the rules anytime. If you own space, that's different. Like, I own this house by the grace of God. We decided to paint the studio green. Who did I need permission from? Nobody. And when I asked the painter to come in, he came in and he painted it green, and it was done. I own the space. I didn't rent it. There was no permission. So with a product like yours, with Subsplash, or with any white labeled app, again, this is the beauty of the moment we're in. 99.9% of the churches on a call like this, in a webinar like this, do not have the resources to hire a full-time software developer. In fact, I was at a business conference last week speaking with a bunch of software developers. They asked me to give a talk, and I'm having lunch with this guy who just literally created a sports app that blew me away. I said, what did it cost to build that app? And he did it on the cheap. Any idea? In the comments, how much did it cost to build that app? I'd love to see some guesses while I tell the rest of the story. It was a super robust app. And okay, you guys are weighing in here. $500, that's not bad. $100, $8,000, $100,000, $10,000, $1.2 million. Oh, that'd be a nice app, wouldn't it? He did it on the cheap, $400,000. $400,000. Yep. And to the high answer, 1.5 million. I promise you, Wes, you could spend in fact, come and see me and I will help you spend 1.5 million. I would not do that. The sky's the limit, right? And so you think, I'm going to build this thing for $20,000. You're not going to get to first base with $20,000 on building a custom app. So most churches are like, well, we can't do it. But the nice thing, what you guys do, what Subsplash does, what other services will do, is they will white label it. So it looks like my church, Connexus Church app, but it's built on Subsplash. Yep. But nobody knows that except in the fine print on the footer. You guys have done the coding. You've invested the millions of dollars. You have the software developers figuring out, okay, now I have iOS 18 and iPhone 16s. So you spend $450,000 building your app out, and then Apple changes to iOS 18. Well, now it's only iOS 17. That's right. Compatible. Now what do we do? When you have larger software services who are white labeling, it's kind of like generic food, right? If you go to Trader Joe's, Trader Joe's didn't make all that food. They have deals in the background. It's like Kirkland brand, right? Kirkland doesn't produce a lot of stuff at Costco. They just have a deal with someone else who makes pancake mix to make their Kirkland brand pancake mix. So that's come to the church space, and that is a complete gift because now you own it. Guess who sees what happens on an app? Everybody who subscribes to that app. There's no filter. There's no changing algorithm. 100% of the people who click get the message. Whereas when you click your Instagram, you don't know what you're going to get. It's a roulette wheel. Your email list is another example. If you're not building an email list, build an email list, build an email list, build an email list. Because, apart from some spam deliverability or what folder it ends up in Gmail, you're going to get 100% of the people who send that. Build a texting list, right? The email open rates, if you're really good, 45%. Texting open rates, 98, 99%. Build an SMS list, and that is owned space. Right. So as far as we know, nobody's going to mess with your app. Nobody's going to mess with your email list so far, and no one's going to mess with your text list. It's 100% deliverability.
That's right.
And that's the difference. And that's what a lot of church leaders don't understand is, and Instagram's sexy and fun and interesting, but anywhere from 2 to 20% of the people who follow you are getting the message. When you're an own space, like an app or email or text message, it's 100% deliverability.
That's right. That's really, really good.
You guys are the specialists.
Yeah.
What did I miss? What did I get wrong?
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it, Carey. That's exactly right. And we've talked to those same people who have come and said, we got bid $1 million for a project. And so for us trying to, again, bring world-class technology that helps the church hit the easy button. So
and then there's ongoing support, right? If you bought $1 million house or a $2 million house, you're like, okay, I'm done. And now that almost bankrupted us, but we made it. And then the roof needs to be redone, and you're like, what? That's $40,000.
Right? Did you budget for that additional amount? Probably
no. I spent all my money on buying the house. Leave me alone.
That's right.
Right? Like it comes with all the carrying costs.
Yes.
These are what people don't realize. So it's not $1 million. It's $1 million and then 50,000. What? 200,000 a year to keep it current and working on Android and working on Apple and working through all of the software updates that happen. It's super complex.
Yeah, that is exactly right. And thankfully, we have a whole team of engineers who have made that the easiest thing possible for a church where you don't have to know code. You were mentioning this, Carey, like you didn't go to seminary to learn how to code, right?
Yeah.
Let's remove that barrier, but also let's make it more effective for churches. So a couple quick details on this. One, your website is your digital doorstep. It's a place to be discovered. We're going to go quick through a few of these, but a place to be discovered. You need to be aware of SEO, which is search engine optimization. Is this discoverable? How do people find us? Gone are the days when they will just probably drive by your church and be really impressed by your billboard. Maybe, but most likely they're going to find you online and they're going to see, some churches are uncomfortable with the word brand, but they're going to see, is this brand? Is this a place that I want to get plugged in? I'm seeking Jesus. I want community. Is this where I can go? So be thoughtful about who you are, why you exist, what you offer, and next steps. Second here, we're talking about mobile technology. Really quick here, there's 168 hours in the week. The average person spends over 4.5 hours on their phone. Who's discipling your people? Right? You might get a couple hours a week with them. So how are we nurturing ongoing, your content creator as a church, your sermons, your Bible reading plans, groups, communication, SMS, email, group chat, and we take care of that for churches partnering with you, but you need to keep people engaged. Give them that little button that pops up, that push notification that drives them back into something that's an owned space. So one quick story, we have rented spaces can lead to increased distractions. Owned spaces can increase engagement. I even heard a pastor last week where I was at a conference and he said, hey, I put my sermon up and YouTube pulled it off. You mentioned this, Carey. He said they pulled it off. They didn't like it. And he goes, thank goodness I had a partner like Subsplash to keep my content and to drive my people back to my own space. So sometimes it's the distraction and sometimes it's legitimately they are in control. And you mentioned that, Carey.
Yeah, I heard this metaphor in the business space a few years ago, but there's a guy who built a $10 million business on Facebook. And his fear was, he says, I feel like I built a $10 million home on an active volcano.
Wow.
And I never know when it's going to go off. And it's true because, we actually had an incident. Like if you listen to my leadership podcast, we're not particularly controversial. But in July, YouTube flagged something that one of my guests said. And I'm like, hey, listen to the whole clip. There's nothing controversial. He was being conciliatory, but there was some magic hidden trigger word that kind of got YouTube's attention. And we worked it out with YouTube and all that stuff. But it's just like, and I'm not one of these paranoid people who are like, we've lost freedom. There's a lot of freedom out there. But yeah, you don't know. And again, your winning strategy yesterday that was getting you 10,000 views might get you 10 views tomorrow. That's the problem with rented space.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And kind of transitioning to now we've got these people, we've talked about the channels, we've talked about the owned space, but how are we getting people into the process of getting connected? Carey, you've said a clear path forward for first-time guests and visitors is a clear path to growing a church.
Yeah. The problem was, and I mean, I've been around long enough to remember the program days of church, and there was an era, and some churches are still in that era, and I'm not here to criticize the way you do ministry. I'm just here to, let's have an outside look at it. So, there was a time where, there were so many programs in a lot of churches that you almost needed a phone book, if anybody remembers them, to explain them all, like a directory of all the programs. And so when a new person comes to your church and they're like, oh, I really love it here, how do I get involved? The moment that you say, well, you could do the new members class, or you could go to Alpha, or you could do this thing that we call next steps, or you could start serving, or you could, and that's very normal in church circles. What happens psychologically to people is the analysis of paralysis. A lot of people know the jam test, which is in a supermarket a number of years ago. They did this experiment where they gave people 8 choices of jams and jellies. And most people kind of looked at it, they sampled it, like think about going to Costco and getting that sample. How many does this Costco serve up? 1. It's not like here are 5 popcorns, it's 1. But they did 8 jams and jellies, and most people just tried them all and then went, oh, okay, and they moved on down the aisle to get their cereal or whatever they were going to get. Then they narrowed it to 3, and the purchase rate went up. So you would think the purchase rate would go up when you offer 8, because you could have, grape or cherry or strawberry or raspberry. But actually people are like, I don't know what to do. And so when you don't have a clear path at your church and everybody, well, you could do this or this or this or this or this, people then are forced to make a decision. They're like, I don't have time to make a decision now. And then they're like, I'll get back to this tomorrow. And then they never get back to it. And they end up doing nothing. So this is really hard. And the more you look at your own ministry, it's easy for me to do this with someone else's ministries. It's really hard to do it with your own. But you've got to look at it and say, if there was one thing we wanted every first-time guest to do, what is it? That's big. Now, you can start simple, like scan a QR code or fill out this welcome form and get a gift. And then what we did was we connected them with someone on our guest services team who would say, well, it sounds like for you, the first right step would be a new members class, or it would be Alpha or whatever. You can almost have a concierge approach, or you can have a one-size-fits-all approach where everybody goes to this step and then they go, you need easy, obvious, strategic steps. And the simpler you make it and the more you narrow the choice, the easier it gets for people.
Yeah, that's really good. One other area just to highlight is an experience like child check-in to be thoughtful of. If it's a new visitor and they're a parent and they're coming into that process, we had actually one of our team members was sharing a story. They recently went to a church and tried to check in their kid. By the time they were done with the process, the sermon was halfway over. So we need to do a little bit better job to make sure we have friendly and helpful people. It's simple and quick. That's something we focused on, trying to improve the experience, but also where technology partners with, this is the next step. This is how you do it. And we want to move people through that efficiently.
Oh, let me just echo that. My kids are grown, so they don't need to be checked in anymore. But what was really cool, I noticed this change. It happened this summer at the church I'm founding pastor of, where we still attend, Connexus, is we went from a desk to a simple scan. And that's how, it's literally beep, and your kids are checked in. Now, I'm sure there's a first-time process, but the easier you make it for people. And listen, kids ministry is a great example. you better get the information and the cell number. And because you can't just randomly, what is this kid's name again? I don't know. Who do we return him to? I have no, like, security and safety are a top priority, but it's really, really important that that be simple, easy, and obvious. And another way to look at that, I remember, if I can tell a story, I don't know that we have time, but we moved over a decade ago from 20% digital giving to over 70% digital.
Yeah, awesome.
And at the time, the technology, particularly in Canada where I am, was clunky. It was really hard to do. In America, you know, you could just sign up with some bank and you're all set one tap. But we had to get a lot of information. I remember the leadership team meeting where we were like, we want to get people to give digitally. How do we do it? And so we made this important strategic decision. We either make it really, because we had to fill out like forms, pages of forms with your bank information and the bank account. Who's going to do that? If that's like, download this form and get back to us, right. 2 people in the whole church are going to do that. No one's going to do that. So we sat around as a leadership team and we said, look, either this is easy for them or easy for us. Which one do we want to make it? Difficult for them, difficult for us. We decided we're going to make it difficult for us and easy for them. So what we did at the time, technology's really caught up, is we're just said, hey, Chris, you want to give, Anna, you want to give digitally to Connexus? Fill out your name and number in this form. It was 2 fields. Someone will call you within 24 hours. Then we call you, Anna, hey, it's Carey from Connexus. I hear you want to give digitally. We got a few forms to fill out. Do you have 10 minutes? And we can just fill out the forms together. Mm-hmm. And literally, we did that through making an appointment with them. We walked them through the form, and we went from something like 15% digital giving to 70% in 12 months. Wow. So that's what you have to do. You have to make your technology do the hard work,
right?
So that it's simple for the guest.
Yeah, I love that. And on giving as well, something we focused on, and it has come a long way. We want people to be able to make that donation so easy it takes less than 6 seconds. How to streamline that process, and it helps. And because we're talking about engagement first, engaged people, they become the giving people. We're not getting people to attend so they give. We want people that do that as a byproduct of, you know, wanting to lean into the community and be a disciple and give. And from that, we see on average our church is actually in the first year see an over 10% increase in giving, let alone a movement
just by making it easy. 10% just by making it easy.
Yeah.
No, that's true. You know, I think about churches I've visited where I want to make a donation. I don't carry cash as a rule. And I'm like, okay, I got to do this and then I got to do that. And then I got to, I just didn't make a donation. Right.
You miss an opportunity. Yeah. Okay. Moving through a few more things here. Connectivity, conversation. Carey, we've talked about the need for discoverability and being present and getting people engaged. How do we move people into a two-way conversation that's more of a dialogue?
Hey, let's be honest. Those of us who are pastors, me included, we're great broadcasters. Mm-hmm. Come to my new series. Come to see this. Come to this event we're having. Come to this dinner we're hosting. Whatever. We're basically a billboard. We're an announcement factory. But real human beings and real relationships don't work that way. Mm-hmm. So if you have an area where, let's say you're texting a parishioner, rather than saying, so glad you joined our church for the first time, Anna, blah, blah, blah. Here's some information. Click this link, click this, come back next Sunday. What have you said? Hey, Anna, it was great to have you on Sunday. How can we pray for you? Mm. Is there anything we can pray about? What have you done? First of all, I've expressed an interest in you, not an interest in me. Secondly, you know, and you can channel that to a prayer team. I mean, there's automations that allow you to send that in a million directions. But it's like, wow, you actually care about me and you're going to care about my issues? Yeah. You are automatically more interested in coming back, or on social media or in the app, just to answer questions. When somebody leaves a comment, answer a question. You know, and right now it's probably easy to do solo for a lot of churches. Get some volunteers involved. Mm-hmm. Like, I have not a huge social media presence, but like I have a team that's in there every day answering questions so that I can focus on content. So if you're a lead pastor and you're feeling overwhelmed, I can't be in the social media comments or on my app answering questions all day, you have volunteers who would love to do that. And they're great at relationships. And now, you know, AI can help with that as well, but people can kind of tell if it's AI. But what you really want to do is you want to have a two-way conversation. Mm-hmm. And when you really build that personal connection, that's what makes people lean forward. because they're marketed to every single day of their life. If all you're doing is spamming them, they're going to disengage.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And thinking about connecting in a two-way conversation and then opportunities to connect throughout the week, just on the technology side, something you highlighted is really important. We want our volunteers to participate, but we also want to make sure that good technology makes you more effective in your mission, but efficient with your time, because we don't want to burn out those people. So finding ways for them to be involved in the community and the connection. We actually have a tool for two-way conversation. It's a messaging tool, more like a Slack. And we had a church who they were aware if somebody was on the outside of their church but not plugged in. They were thinking about the journey of getting them in. And instead, that person went into their app, joined a messaging group, and threw out, hey, we're doing a barbecue if anybody would like to come. And they're brand new to the church. And the church staff couldn't facilitate it, but then your people were able to participate and say, hey, we'd come. And you start building community, right? By leveraging tools and by letting your people also participate in their gifting.
Well, what's nice about that too, and I'm not trying to slam Facebook here, but if you're part of a Facebook group, I mean, my goodness, it used to be direct communication, right? I message you, you message me. Now it's top comments, most interesting comments. The algorithm decides, like, it's really hard to follow a thread in a Facebook messaging group that's linear. And again, by doing it privately, it's like, oh, this isn't confusing. They're not trying to reach millions of people with this Facebook group. It's like, oh, it's just us here having a conversation.
That's exactly right.
That was such an amazing conversation. I think we hit so many different points, and we were able to thread that needle through how to make technology a resource that the church can leverage to get their people engaged. And it is moving, like we said, from attendance to engagement. And I am just so grateful for the time we're able to spend on that point. As our very last point to round out this conversation, reimagine serving from volunteering to engagement. And Carey, I know that this is something that you're very passionate about. And we love this quote so much from you here at Subsplash. People who serve, as a rule, get the mission. They're on a mission and they love the mission. We'll love to hear you expand on this a little bit.
Yeah, I had an aha moment a few years ago where, you think about the ways people get involved. They invite a friend, they give, they serve, or they join a group. And I love groups. I'm part of a group. We're actually moving into a new group right now. And I was always championing groups. But here's the problem with groups. Groups can become inward looking and they can become self-serving. You get something out of it. You think about serving. Yeah, you're using your gift. And yes, people who serve do get a reward of some kind. Not always here on earth, maybe in heaven. But it's an outward focused thing. And what I noticed is that if people really joined and they got serving, they engaged deeper. It was easier to see those people shifting. They shifted, let me put it this way. They shifted quickly and more readily to moving from consumer mindset to contributor if they started to serve. And so I began to rethink the conventional wisdom that get them involved in a group first, and then once they're involved in the group, they can start serving, to actually saying, if we can only get 1 hour of their time, I'm going to have them serve. Because serving is inherently selfless, and that puts you on mission. So I got very interested in that, and I would stand by that to this day, where I think the people who serve really get on mission faster than the people who are just in community group. Now, ideally, they do both. But if you had to pick one, I would pick serving.
Yeah. How'd you normalize the topic of talking about serving?
Just I think you just do it, to be honest with you. Sometimes we overcomplicate it, right, Chris? And it was just like, just get involved. If you tell people, if you don't give them a lot of options, it's like your next logical step is to serve. They're like, okay. And I'm not talking about, an atheist who shows up and the second Sunday they're leading worship. I mean, there are clear, thoughtful steps involved where you want them to maybe start on the parking team with a greeting team.
Right. And then here, this should be a little bit of a warning sign for all of us. 86% of Christians say they want to serve. Maybe that's positive, to be fair.
It is. It's huge. It's great.
Right? but only 30% are actually serving. Maybe some of us are convicted even reading the stat right now. But thinking about the opportunity in front of us, some of the things we want to think through in technology are, again, making it easy. We don't want people to have to fill out long forms, things that are distracting, take time. Make it easy for them to see the opportunity, target it, normalize talking about serving, as you've said, Carey. Thinking about a system to manage volunteers so it's easy for them. Don't put the burden on them to remember what they've said or not. Use an automated system, again, something we focus on here. Messaging tools. We found so many groups and volunteers. It's up to whoever is leading that group to figure out how to communicate to people. Text, WhatsApp, Facebook groups versus, again, bring it in-house to an organized channel.
And that makes so much sense, because if it's like, okay, the weekly lessons going out on email, but also check your Slack channel and also check the Facebook group. And then I may send you a DM in Instagram as well. People are overwhelmed by the channels. And if you've got one centralized delivery service, and just to add to that, I mean, that is a huge gap.
Yeah.
It's like 86% of people say, I want to help.
Right.
And 30% of people actually do. And now the other factor that we could put in there, we know this biblically, we don't need a poll, 100% of Christians have spiritual gifts.
That's
so
right.
100% of Christians have spiritual gifts, 86% want to use them, and 30% actually use them.
Well,
so that's a big gap, and that's a challenge to every leader listening.
Right. And one other note too, just thinking about making things efficient for your teams once they are serving. We don't want to burn people out. We tend to do that to our top core people. How do you think through that in terms of culture on mission, but how do you not burn people out?
Well, I think, that question did come up in the chat earlier, so I'm glad we went back to it. You're not asking the problem, because that stat you just showed is such a good reminder. If only 30% are serving, but 86% have the desire to serve, there's probably too much on that 30%, right? There's just too much. And so often we get the small splinter of volunteers who say, I will help. And then it's like, well, actually, you're on every Sunday because we don't have enough volunteers and da-da-da-da-da. And the other thing I would find, too, is your high-capacity people often run in the opposite direction if you're not giving them what they need to do their job well.
Right.
So let's say they're responsible for teaching a Bible study, and your staff says, I'm going to send out the study guide by Thursday afternoon. You know what a high-capacity volunteer is doing Thursday afternoon? Checking their email or whatever to see if the study guide comes through. If they don't have it by Thursday night, they're, hey, you promised you were going to give this. Can I get it? Oh, yeah, sorry, man, I got busy this week. And then, Friday rolls around. Friday night, here it is. That high-capacity volunteer is like, I'm out of here. Sorry, man, not serving anymore. If you have one delivery system, if you have simplicity working in your favor, like if it's complicated for the user, it's complicated for the sender too. So I think having that streamlined service, do what you said you're going to do when you said you're going to do it, meeting deadlines, that does an awful lot. And as you get more and more people on board, the load gets shared. It's the difference between cleaning up a dinner party with one person left in the kitchen after versus 8 of us are saying, many hands make light work. Let's all just work on this together. You can be done in 20 minutes.
Yeah, I love it.
I love that. And, just like we're saying, we are establishing a serving culture, not just a one-time I'm going to serve here or there. It is a culture of serving in the church, which really does just change the trajectory of somebody's engagement in your community.
Yeah. And I think it becomes normal, right? It becomes normalized then.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with that. It becomes the rhythm of their engagement at your church rather than just something they sometimes do. This conversation has been absolutely amazing. I feel like we could sit here and talk for another 3 hours today, but we do want to respect your time, Carey, and we are just so grateful again for your willingness to come and have this conversation with us and all of the people that have joined us today. We have this ebook that we would absolutely love for each of you to download. It is something that we've partnered with Carey to produce. It's called Innovative Ways Thriving Churches Deepen Engagement. And it is, again, a free resource available for download right now. You can click the button. We'll also send out a link to that after the webinar. But it is going to just expand this conversation a little bit more. And we're happy to offer that. So, Carey, we know, too, that part of this conversation today, your team is offering a special promotion, $97 for the first 90 days of the Art of Leadership Academy. We would love to hear you give a quick flyover of what is the Art of Leadership and why is this valuable for somebody to say yes to right now?
Well, we're really big into community as well. And we know that a lot of pastors and church leaders feel alone. So what we decided to do a few years ago, our public channels got so big with the podcast and the blog and everything that we decided to create a community that's open to all, that for church leaders. And I do all of my courses. I'll teach on topics like this inside there. We do a live coaching call every month. We do your staff training for you. It's done for you. We have a library of probably close to 50 15-minute videos right now that you can just play every month for your staff and train them in key skills. And that's what we call the Art of Leadership Academy. So we'd love to have you try it out. $97 for 30 or for 90 days, I guess it is. And then it's a modest, I think, high value annual fee after that. But it's a thriving community of almost a couple thousand leaders that connect. And it's not just me solving your problem. I'm there live in the academy on a regular basis. If you hear from me, it's me, not my team. But also it's a chance for you to solve other people's problems and make friends and build community. And it's across denominational lines. So we'd love to have you there.
That is amazing. $97 for the first 90 days. Again, there was a button on the screen, and you will also have that information here after our webinar wraps up. As someone who used to work in the church, Carey, this kind of stuff is something that I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to produce this content. It is invaluable. It is such a resource for pastors and leaders to not only find connection with other people doing the work, but also to just sharpen their skills and do the very best they can in their church communities. So thank you for this offer. Thank you for the commitment to producing this content. We are so grateful for this special offer. So Chris, over to you. Absolutely. Yeah. Please give us a little bit of the flyover of what Subsplash has for people today.
Absolutely. And you can see the button there. We would love for you to experience the difference. Some of the things we talked about today and Carey highlighted as well around technology, from your website and mobile apps to communication tools to giving and managing volunteers and serving. We have a whole connected platform. Love to tell you more. So we are doing a special promotion as well. We are giving 30% off our setup and subscription for exclusive giving partners. And that'll be made available to you also. And if you'd like to take that next step and really think about increasing your impact by driving engagement and efficiency, which is very, very important for your team, we'd love to help you take those next steps in 2025.
Amazing. Well, as we've said, this conversation has just been so valuable. We are just so grateful for you, Carey. You, like I said in the beginning of our conversation, you are such a dear friend to Subsplash. Our friendship and partnership with you over the years has been one of our favorite things. Doing this work together is really what pushes it forward. And we are all on the same team here. And so getting this opportunity today to really dive in has just been so wonderful. So thank you again.
Well, thank you. And it's very mutual. You know, it's amazing if you think about it, like what we were talking about, right? How much would it take for the average church to produce an app? The answer is it's actually impossible financially, manpower wise, people power wise. But even if you had a church of 50,000, it's gonna tax the edge of your budget and your ability to do it. So the fact that an organization like Subsplash would come along and say, we're not going to do this for the business world, we're going to do this for the church world because of our faith. It's a really cool moment in the life of the church that we have organizations and leaders like you that are saying, no, we're going to do this on behalf of the church to move the mission forward. That's really cool. And for what I do, I look at it, I went to law school and no one taught me how to run a law firm. And I went to seminary and I wasn't quite sure how to run a church. So that's what I try to, that's right. Well, I try to bring, right?
And you do it well. Thank you for investing in the church, Carey.
Yes, you sure do. And I just, I think often I get the opportunity to chat with our engineers sometimes, and they are the most brilliant people doing all of the things I would never know how to do. So it is such an honor to be able to bring that to the church when I get this little inside scoop of, oh my goodness, it is just more than I could have ever imagined to not only create an app, but as you mentioned, keep it up and running and make sure that it's working with Apple and Google and the updates and the this and the that. It's there's so many layers. So
I don't know that you know this, but my oldest son is a coder. And sometimes when he's working and I'm looking over at his laptop, I'm like, this is another language and maybe another planet. I have no idea what he is doing. It's pretty amazing.
it is. We'll send him our way, Carey, because he's
Yeah.
and again, thank you like that today. We have a happy rest of the week.